am here to welcome our next speaker to the stage, Veronica Michaels. Veronica received her BA in English from Minnesota State University, Moorhead in 1995 with a minor in women's studies. Professionally, Veronica spent 15 plus years working in higher education enrollment management with programs focused on providing academic and social support towards degree completion. Recently, she has had the pleasure to work with a variety of nonprofit organizations with a focus on relationship building and fundraising. Currently, Veronica is the director of the Career Development Center at MSUM and the CEO of Prairie Products, LLC. She is so grateful for the opportunities she has to support building a healthy, safe, and vibrant community for all people to be connected to. Veronica lives in Fargo and enjoys sewing, gardening, yoga, and time spent enjoying the outdoors. She is excited for the opportunity to be here today. Help me welcome Veronica.
Can you hear me? Great. Oh, it's so wonderful to be here, and what a beautiful facility. I just want to give a round of applause to Patrick for doing such good work in our community with such high energy. Yay, Patrick. So I was excited to come today and have the opportunity to talk about sexual harassment, which you don't hear very often, right? Someone being excited to talk about that. But the reason I was excited to talk about that is I think it's such an important conversation for us to be having, and a difficult one, and I think that we need to have more safe places to really talk. I was fortunate this last spring to have met a new friend, Mel. Mel is from the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center here in Fargo-Moorhead, and she is my guest to join in this conversation and to really talk through some important questions I think that we often have about what is sexual harassment, what do we do when it happens, kind of the mess that comes with it, and just our own fears and concerns about even asking questions sometimes. So Mel has joined me, and I want to introduce her a little bit. So Mel is the Prevention Education Director at Rape and Abuse Crisis Center here in Fargo-Moorhead, whose mission is to provide crisis intervention, advocacy, counseling, education, and prevention of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child sexual abuse. She is a lifelong advocate for social justice and is passionate about helping others break down barriers, gaining the tools necessary to thrive in a changing world. Now, I could say so much more about Mel. We both are MSUM graduates. You're a social work degree.
Yep.
But we're going to stop there because we know we want to get into the meat of these questions. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first one, Mel. What constitutes sexual harassment in the workplace?
All right. You know what, you guys? I actually wrote this one down. Usually, I know things off the top of my head, but I wanted to make sure that you all had the legal definition for it. So, sexual harassment is a form of sex discrimination that violates the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Sexual harassment at work is a form of unlawful sex discrimination. As I said, it's unwelcome, verbal, visual, nonverbal, or physical contact or conduct of a sexual nature, that's based on somebody's sex, that is severe or pervasive, and affects working conditions. So examples of this could be, cornering somebody in their office, unwanted sexual advances, sharing explicit pictures or inappropriate pictures or social media content or emails. It could be looking at somebody up and down, looking at their body in a sexual way. It could be quid-pro-quo, asking for favors. And then also maybe reprimanding somebody if they do not respond to your sexual innuendo or your requests for a date or something like that, you may penalize them for that in their role at work.
Okay, that's a really clear definition.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a pause. I want us to turn to our partner. So partner up, so turn to someone next to you. And I want just to exchange this. Do you understand what Mel just said? Do you feel like you got a good understanding of what defines sexual harassment? So just answer that with each other. Go for it. Okay, good job, you guys. So, do you feel like you understood Mel's explanation? Shake your head if you felt like you did. Okay, good, good. I think it's important to check in on just the definition because what Mel just said was a big mouthful, I thought, didn't you all? That's a lot of instances. You know, one thing I am reminded about, and this is a weird analogy, but when I buy toothpaste, I don't know if you've noticed, when you go to buy toothpaste, there's a lot of toothpaste, right? And you sit there for a while looking at, should I brighten, should I whiten, should I stop my cavities? I'm not sure. But anyway, this, I think, sexual harassment is one of those issues that reminds me of going to the toothpaste aisle because there are so many components of what can happen. There's so many things, like you said, images, it can be just a look, it can be something expressed. So I want to make sure that we're definitely on the same page there, okay? So,
Not only is it like the toothpaste aisle, it's probably just as exciting to talk about sexual harassment, right? I know, anyway.
So what can I do to prevent sexual harassment in my workplace?
Okay. You know, something I talk about, I'm out in the community a lot having these conversations, and what I say is, how do people know when they come into our community, when they come into your place of work, into your organization, into your homes, wherever you are, how do they know that violence is not okay? What does that look like? Are there posters posted somewhere? Do you have, your procedures or your processes in place? Do people know when they're onboarded in your organization what that looks like, what the steps are, that if they feel like they're being harassed and there's an incident, they know exactly what to do, what information they need to have? You know, again, how do people know when they come into your business that this is a safe place to be? How do new employees know that? Do you have your mission, vision, values posted somewhere? Is it, again, on your walls? Is it on your screensavers? What does that look like?
That's a really good point. I think that, you know, for small nonprofits, sometimes you feel like you're the only one doing every job. So writing a manual or having some of those formalized systems in place sometimes take longer. And I wonder how everyone is doing that. So we're going to pause again. I want you to turn to your partner and I want you to talk about answering Mel's question. How do people know when they walk into your business that it's a safe place? Go ahead. That's a really good question. No. Okay, welcome back. So it sounds like you guys had some discussion. Mel and I were talking too. I think that often, you know, we think about making our workplace safe after a complaint has happened, right? And that's just the nature of being human. Mistakes happen, and then we make a correction. So in this case, it's something, again, you know, we really want to think about how are we creating a safe space? But the next question, I think, is really important too. So what do I do to help when I have some complaint that comes to me from an employee, or in our cases, a volunteer, an employee, a board member? What do you do?
Well, legally, you know, I'm not a lawyer or an HR professional, but legally you have to deal with it. And I would definitely make sure that you research that and look into the civil rights law. Not only that, you need to address it and keep it confidential. And then what are the steps? What are the policies and practices in your organization, your agency, your business that an employee goes through? What is the process? And it's important to let them know what that is on the front end, to empower employees to know what that process looks like so they know how to navigate the system. So when they come to you, certainly it is something that you need to listen to. I would say, okay, how difficult it would be for somebody to come forward and say, this is happening to me. Think of all the barriers to that. If I say something, this might ruin this professional relationship I have. If I say something, I could lose my job. Maybe this person is my superior or my supervisor that this is happening with. How do I navigate this? So the courage it takes for somebody to come and report that is huge. So acknowledging them, saying, okay, I believe you, we're gonna deal with this. And whatever your policies are in your agency, then that is how you would go about that.
I really like that you said that, because I think it's so brave for people to make a complaint. In my work now, I was visiting recently with a student, so a young person between 18 and 25, that was experiencing sexual harassment in her workplace. And when I was talking to her about, kind of some steps and direction, one of the things that she talked really openly about was her embarrassment that it had happened, that she couldn't stop it, and also her shame around hurting this other person's ability to have a job. So I love that you framed it that way, about really taking that seriously, listening to the person, of course believing them, because that is such a brave step, and kind of walking through that. I think it is important, you noted right away that there might be an opportunity for some legal support here, some support through offices like yours. The Human Relations Department in North Dakota also provides a lot of support, but there are places to go. So, next question. What should I do if an employee is being sexually harassed by the public, donors, or a board member? What do I do in that case?
Right. So we're out a lot in the community and fundraising and doing all the things that, making those connections and doing all those things you need to do. And it can be really difficult and unfortunate when, say, you have a vendor or a donor and you see some inappropriate behavior happening, perhaps with either yourself or one of your employees. And so I think it's just really important to remember that things only happen in which we allow it to happen. So if you see that, what are some things that you could do? You can go and, I think we underestimate the power of checking in with a person. Just saying, are you okay? Are you okay? They'll tell you if they are or not, right? They might not. Might be a really awkward situation. They don't want to say that. Or you can cause a distraction. Hey, come on over here. I want you to see this. Or, hey, let's look at this project over here. I got a couple questions for you. Distracting, right? Or if you're completely uncomfortable, and which is totally fine, we all have our own barriers, find somebody to help. Find somebody to help. If it's a coworker, find your supervisor, right? If it's grab a buddy that's there at the event with you, and go up and talk to the person, or directly intervene and say, are you doing okay? Do you need anything? Those are all small steps that we can take. Again, recognizing they're not easy. We kind of all want to mind our own business. But I think when we remember that things only happen in which we allow, I think it's important to remember that this will continue until we are able to step forward.
I think those are great examples. I think often we feel like we see something bad happen, we have to have this beautifully graceful response, right? It's not. It's messy. It looks weird. I know for myself, what I want to do in situations like that is I just want to respond. Right. So my response sometimes ends up being, I'm uncomfortable. And that's all I say. Or that seems weird, or do the distraction thing.
Right.
Because, again, I don't think our minds are clear in that moment. I think, it's just like any fight or flight situation. So those can be really clear statements. So let's pause and talk about this together with your partner. Because I do believe the nature of nonprofit work, and especially working with donors, means that we really want to be graceful with people. We also want to give and make relationships with people, like Mel said. And there's a lot at stake. I think that sexual harassment happens far more than we recognize in our nonprofit world. So let's just take a pause, and I'd like you all, with your partner at the table there, to talk about this question. So go ahead and talk about, what would you personally do if you saw this happening in your workspace for an employee? Okay, welcome back. So, the nature of sometimes being a Midwesterner means, actually, I'm really happy that you're talking, so I do want to commend you. And you're talking about difficult things. But what I wanted to mention is the nature of being Midwesterners sometimes means we're a little bit more quiet. I'm not, but people are. And what that means sometimes, too, is that we can fall into bystander behavior really easily. You know, it's really easy for us, just kind of like what you were saying, like, oh, is this my business? Should I be overhearing this conversation? To find lots of reasons to excuse ourselves and to say, this isn't our business, right? So I'm from a small town, Climax, Minnesota, graduating class of 17, so everything is the town's business, but you pretended it wasn't. But again, I think this really trips us up because we both want to be really graceful, we want to verbalize in this wonderful way. Those things don't often happen when a challenge comes up. So I want us to all think about giving ourselves grace and just saying something, right? Because it's about taking action and stopping that behavior, and when it's someone else, really making sure it's a safe place for that person.
And even if you're stuck and you go, okay, that's gonna stop it right there, because people are gonna look at, what was that? Like, no, or ouch, or, or whatever that is, it's that moment in time that's going to diffuse that situation.
You know, the other thing that I think sometimes happens is, let's say you do say something, and then you get this response like, oh, you can't take a joke, don't you have a good sense of humor? Again, I think taking a punch like that you can't take a joke, maybe you don't have a good sense of humor, doesn't matter, right? It's that you have made a statement, and that's a normative response from the person who has verbalized something that's probably not.
And I know we've talked about this before, that when you're in a group of people, and say you're out for drinks or whatever, you're at a fundraiser and you're around a bunch of people and you've got, a group chatting, and somebody says something completely inappropriate or sexist or out of line or just inappropriate, and everybody gets kind of quiet, right? 99% of those people in that group, or however many, feel the same way you do. It's that one person that's saying that is the only person that's typically okay with that behavior. So if one of you says something, everybody around is going to go, oh, thank goodness, that was really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I guess our next question is, can I or should I protect the privacy of someone who has made a complaint or the alleged harasser, actually?
Now, I would say if you're the employer and somebody is coming to you and you're the supervisor, in any case, yes, it is completely confidential. You must maintain the dignity and worth of persons on either end, both times, and that's legal. And again, I'm not an HR professional, but you need to do that. Now, as far as if your coworker comes to you and confides in you and you're listening and saying, okay, how can I come alongside you to help? Are you interested in reporting? We always have to let the person, they're an adult, have their agency, what they want to do. Do you need me to come with you to help report this? Those kind of things. But keep that confidential too, because a lot of really messy stuff could happen. If you go over and tell that coworker that this happened and oh my gosh, and this is not good. So yes, keep it confidential.
I agree. I think it's very important, of course, if you're the supervisor, to keep things confidential, but even if you're a coworker or a friend, because that person might be just verbalizing and kind of thinking through what their next steps are. We can provide information, support, encourage that person to get help, and for the person who that is being told that they are having harassing behavior, I think that's really important too. You want to keep the dignity and respect of all people that are involved in the process until you figure out what's really happened. Now, one thing that I think is interesting with this is who gets protected. And this is where I think we can get a little bit mixed up on, can sexual harassment happen to men? Can it happen to people who are homosexual? So I think these are cases where, again, you want to make sure that you are valuing every side and recognizing that this can happen
to everybody.
Everyone.
It can happen to anybody. Male, female, female, male, 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 female, it can happen to anybody. So absolutely.
Okay. Great. So, why should prevention include putting a stop to unprofessional behavior?
Well, it's not really prevention unless we're putting a stop to it before it starts, right? That's what prevention means. That's what primary prevention means, is that we stop the behavior or the action before it begins. And creating spaces, for example, in your workplaces that welcome people, and like we talked about, how do they know that this is a safe place? One of those things includes, do you have your coworkers back, right? If something's happening, are you able to speak up and say, yeah, we can't do this? Or are you able to let people know? We were just talking at my spouse's work. Somebody said something really inappropriate, and he made a joke like, yeah, we don't do that here. Anyway, but you can make it funny, but we don't do that here. This isn't how we talk. Again, believing, listening. You're not the therapist, right? You're the coworker, but helping them, coming alongside them and helping them. It's important.
I agree. I think one of the hard things is what is unprofessional behavior? And I think we got to talk about it. So I would like you guys, with your partner again, to discuss what is unprofessional behavior. We're good with time, I guess. Okay, we're back. So how did that go? You guys have a lot to say. Okay, so I'm curious to hear if anyone is brave enough. What did you say? What's unprofessional behavior in the workplace? Locker room humor. Locker room humor. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
How some people are just realistically they're actually ignorant to the fact that they are sexually harassing because they think that it only is limited to physical touch and to things that are done that way. But it's something as simple as a group of women talking about a man and his looks and making you very uncomfortable. People don't think about that. They don't think about it the other way around. But they don't think about it in those respects and thinking about it as that it's just a whole spectrum of things that can be done.
Yes, exactly.
And you know what's interesting about that too is I bring that back again to nobody's told them any different. So if we don't speak up and tell people, typically when we think of in your mind historically if there's been somebody in your life that you've met and you're just like, ugh. Like how many times do you think somebody told them that they made me feel ugh? Probably never. And that's why they continue to do that. So that's why we talk about it's important to be able to speak up.
Yeah. And I like that example too, because I think, oh, go ahead. No, please. Would you like to share, Stacy?
No, I'll think about it.
Okay. I think it's important to talk about this because things can get a little bit fuzzy. Instances of harassment can happen outside of your working hours, right? And as we are in a society where maybe more and more people are socially interacting with their coworkers, I have more instances when you're at a benefit. There's lots of things that can happen outside of your work relationship, but it's still your work relationship, right? I think the other thing, just like you said, I saw recently in my own experience is a great male employee, does a really good job, also is a big CrossFitter. So people were looking at his Facebook page because they had been his friends and really talking about his body and the way he looked. And again, if we would have talked like that, if that was conversation would have been happening about a woman, we would definitely be tipped off. But because in that case it was a man, I think it was a little bit slower to happen. So how do you stop unprofessional behavior? And again, we're going to pause on this one because I want you all to talk about this for a couple minutes. Is how do you stop unprofessional behavior in your workspace? So go ahead and let's talk. Sorry to scare you. We're back. So why I took time to have you talk about this at your seats is, again, when we can set some parameters in our workplace around our values, the vision, the mission, we can really deter some of these things from happening. But it also helps people have clear information about what their expectations at work are. When we are our kindest selves, we can respect that we are working with new employees to the world, right? New professionals, that we want to help people understand what does it mean to be a professional and what is the behavior that is acceptable in our space. Far too often, I would compare this to a marriage. In your marriage, sometimes how you just decide suddenly about who does all the tasks without really ever talking about it, but suddenly someone is doing all these tasks and someone is doing all these tasks and you somehow agree. I think that can happen at work with our expectations too. Actually, in any relationship, right? That we're not as clear about what our expectations are. And then when people don't meet our expectations, we can get very angry. For on the employee side, both with someone who might be having some bad behavior or someone who's being mistreated, we want both employees to understand what the parameters are, where to go, and to know that you care about them and you want to help. So I think that's really, again, important to start thinking about what does that unprofessional behavior look like. Any comments, Mel?
No, I just lost it. I had it right there, and I just lost it. Okay.
Do you all have some good suggestions for stopping unprofessional behavior within your workspaces? Did you have it again?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Certainly people who participate in harassing behavior, there are people who are very extremely purposeful and groom others, right? Sometimes our behaviors are a product of our culture and our norms, right? Our societal norms. And we do things without really thinking about it because maybe in this group of people we talk about this, but probably shouldn't talk, it's just inappropriate, period. So I think remembering too that people who maybe have harassing behavior, it's important to call that out, because they might be able to correct that behavior and say, I didn't know that. That wasn't my intent. I understand that wasn't your intent, but here's how it came across. I don't think you really wanted to do that, but this is how it came across.
Yes, exactly. And I think that goes to this next question is really how do you change that culture? And I like what you said earlier. We are all living in this society, and there are some ideas and some opinions that we sometimes have about gender, ethnicity, ability that we don't want to have. It's like the water we're swimming in, right? I mean, we are impacted by bias in many times, and we can make mistakes. We can say things that are not the way we want to say them, but both with that in your mind that we have these things in our society that we struggle with, then we're personal, just regular humans, right? That have our own thoughts and opinions that are changing, but then we also have that culture at work.
Right. We all have them. And everybody's going to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. We might say the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? I think it's just really important that we check our own behavior and our own value systems and what we believe is okay and how that is impacting the people around us. I think if you just check in with yourself and say, probably shouldn't have said that. How can I rectify this situation? Or how can I make sure that this doesn't happen again?
We have great resources in our community too, from our college campuses to Rape and Abuse Crisis Center, some other organizations and consultants that are really there to help come in and talk to your workforce about bias. So that could be a place to start too. But even just having a conversation just like we're having today is another really great starting point. One of the next questions I wanted to really talk about just before we end here is, what happens when staff ignores or shuns someone who has complained? And what do you do in that instance? It's kind of gotten away from you. You wish it was going to be confidential. That ship has sailed. Now you are dealing with staff that are maybe bullying the person that has made the complaint.
Mm-hmm. You have to address it. I mean, it all starts with your organization's leadership. You have to address it, right? Because what happens if you don't address it? It's just going to continue to spiral out of control, and that person isn't going to feel safe in your environment. They might be an amazing employee, and you're going to lose them. And then what that's going to show the rest of your employees is this behavior is acceptable, and if I speak up, and if I have the courage to speak up and say, I don't want this to happen to me anymore, nothing's going to happen with it. And so, this is just the way it's going to be there. You're not going to retain healthy and happy employees. So it's really important to address those issues head on. I recognize, I talk about this stuff every day, and sometimes it's still uncomfortable. I recognize it's not, the most fun topic to discuss or things to have conversations about, but we have to have them.
Yeah, exactly. I think do something. That's the starting point, right? Is to do something. As a fundraiser, there were lots of times that I was by myself with people. And when I think about that experience, there's lots of times that I could have felt very unsafe. How are we talking to our chief fundraising officers at our organizations about what are the limits for them? Are there places that you don't want to visit that person's home? Are there other opportunities? Again, are we constantly asking each other in the tasks that we're doing, what is constituting a safe and healthy place for people? If someone tells you that they don't want to visit with someone, I think it's really important to ask more about why. Again, as employees, we want to hit our goals. People can feel really ashamed about the experience that they might have had, but you should really explore that because, as nonprofit leaders, we know there's a lot of women in the room. And that means that there could be a lot of instances where people feel like they're not in a power position and they feel really vulnerable. So it is really important, like Mel said, to really ask each other questions and keep talking. Now, I want to pause for a second. Do we have any questions in the audience? Wow, we did a good job.
Either that or they're.
It's
talk about it? Yeah.
And then does anyone have, a question back there. Awesome.
So a question on this question, I guess you said address it, but how? In a publicly, privately, one-on-one with people? What do you say to not maybe embarrass the person or make them stick out further?
Okay, that's.
And I would say it depends, right? What is your relationship with that employee? Is there a lot of trust built? Probably more oftentimes than not, it would be a private conversation that you'd have with each employee that's partaking in this behavior. But again, at the same time when you're doing that, you're making the changes that you need to make in your agency so that people feel safe and they know that this isn't going to happen anymore. If this happens again, here are your consequences. Make sense?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that when the instance is happening, it's really important to stop it right there by saying something like, I'm uncomfortable with this conversation and we need to stop right now. And then I would have private appointments with both parties. Because you do want to address people, you want to give them the respect to be by themselves, give them the opportunity to answer and think through it, and also recognize that we don't always want to behave badly, right? We make mistakes. So for both people, this is a confidential opportunity for you to meet with them as a supervisor. If you're a peer, again, it's an opportunity to ask that person if you can visit with them, if you saw something happen, before even going to your supervisor too. So you have many options, like Mel said. Anyone else?
So this came up in one of our staff meetings just recently when we're out visiting with donors, and right now the political scene is pretty charged. And people will bring things up and I'll say, I just never get into politics. But a lot of times they'll keep going. And their comments, I was sharing, that sometimes they're extremely offensive. At what point, if you're working with donors and you're trying to build this relationship, at what point do you say something? Or, I think about my dad who at 87 said, don't try to change me now. What are your recommendations for that?
Well, I first want to say, and I want to recognize privilege, right? Because I've been in those rooms too when people are saying that, and I have to say something because I'm the person they're talking about sometimes. You know, they look like me. So it's always your personal choice because you are trying to figure out how to deal with this relationship. But there's nothing wrong with saying that you feel uncomfortable about something and you would prefer just not to talk about that. And not even if it's if you want to put it in the kind of the political sector, but I think for me, some of the comments that are very negative, I wouldn't consider that politics. I think that's personal opinion. So I try to frame things like that and just being really open. Wow, I'm surprised that you said that. I find it hurtful. I'm offended. Can we please talk about something else?
And I've had this happen too, if it continues, it's almost like when you're dealing with children sometimes, honestly, and you have to repeat yourself again. And you just kind of stay on that. I'm not going to discuss this today with you. How about we discuss this? I'm not going to discuss this with you today, and then try and change the subject.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult though, of course, because many of our nonprofits, we're dealing with issues around homelessness, poverty, lots of places where people are feeling away from the system, right? So yeah, I would love to talk more with you about this because it's a delicate matter. I think, what are you all thinking? I can see your faces. Because this happens, right, Koya?
So, Brene Brown says that it's okay to be vulnerable, so I'm going to do it. I was a partner in a business a few years ago, and I had a situation with a large client. Of course, they always have to be the large clients. And this was happening to me in a very public setting, and I talked to my business partner about it, and his initial reaction was, well, Scotty's harmless. And I said, I don't care if he's harmless. I'm not comfortable with it. And I'm a partner in this company. So how does our receptionist feel? Especially when we're in a public setting. We were a sponsor for an event. I can't be rude, but I have to be assertive. And it just put me in a really tough spot. But I think having the courage to say, I'm not comfortable with it, and that's your opinion, but it's not good enough for me, and it's certainly not good enough for the people that, we're providing their livelihood. So I think I had to ask for his help, and he did. The next time we worked together, he said, I can't remember exactly how he said it, because I think there was an F word in there. But, since then, Scotty's never bugged me about it. But, the point is, I don't think Scotty intended to be offensive, but he made me feel uncomfortable, and his wife was sitting right there. Like, it was so wrong. And I was really glad that I had the courage to say something, because I don't know that all of us do, and sometimes we have to be the voice for others also.
Koya, I really appreciate what you just said, because you're right. When we have power in that situation, we need to exert it. And because there are other people watching, right? There could be another employee that even feels like they have less power. There could be interns, young people. So it's really important. And for your business partner to have taken an action was so important too in supporting you. Any other comments? Well, we're at our last 10 seconds. We really appreciate that you have joined us today, not just to talk about sexual harassment, but we are really happy that Patrick and the team really took the time to have this conversation. Again, the reason that we set it up to be conversational is this isn't that scary when we talk like normal humans, right? We care about people. That's why you're nonprofit leaders or philanthropists yourself. And that means we care about what happens when bad things happen. Not just to those people that we're serving, but to the people that we work with. So there's lots of ways, just start. Now, what I want to end with is, I know you have a little pad of paper in front of you, and I want you to write down, what are you going to do this week to make sure that this stops happening in our workplaces and in our society? So what is the first action that you're going to take this week at your business to turn this around? It took me a long time in my professional career to understand something that I heard really early, and that was inaction is hurtful. And I just didn't get it until I was more of a manager. And it is. Inaction is hurtful. Your leadership means that you're there to take care of things, and that it's your responsibility that everyone is safe in the environments that we work in. So thank you, Mel, for joining me today.
Yes,
and thank you guys.